ladies and gentlemen. You are more than welcome to another episode of the Coffee at 11 show, brought to you on this beautiful midweek morning here, courtesy of wigwam.ie SME peer support. Delighted in particular to have my friend for many years, delighted to say he's my friend for many years, and special guest, very special guest this morning is Gerry Duffy. And I'm going to ask Gerry to say hello and cheers us with your coffee mug. Say hello to us all and show us. That counts perfectly well, Gerry. That's classic Gerry Duffy. I love it. Gerry, we're going to go to Q&A as I mentioned. My last question, if I may, is one tip. What would you say to your nearest and dearest? You get through COVID, come out in great shape, the far side by doing blah. What's the one blah for Gerry Duffy, please?
Okay, so I remember I got to give you a long answer to this one, so maybe over 2 or 3 minutes if that's okay. And I found this monumentally powerful. And it ties into a chat that Raymond and I were having, and a few people just before we officially started. I remember I was on the internet one night 4 or 5 years ago, and I saw this very powerful video where this person wrote up the 9 times tables on a flip chart. So 9 times 1, 9 times 2, might be bringing back a few memories for a few people in the room, the maths exams. But anyway, they went down all the way down to 9 times 7. And then they wrote an equals, 9 times 1 equals, all the way down to 9 times 7 equals. And then they start to fill in the answers from the bottom. 9 times 7 is 63, 54, 45, 36, 9 times 3 is 27, 18, 7. And straight away everybody, of course, gravitates, wait a minute, you got one wrong. But what it highlights for us is how we are conditioned to see or ignore all the things that are right instead of just when one, so many things might be right in our life, and yet one thing happens. And don't get me wrong, I'm monumentally respectful of COVID and the impact that it has on so many people. But how much more difficult would be, so if 9 times 1 is 7 represents, because sometimes those things definitely do happen in our lives, and we certainly have a big 9 times 1 is 7 now, which is something that we don't want. It's not what we want it to be. We want 9 times 2 is 18 and 9 times 3 is 27. So in order to help me get through it, I've learned the value, and we could bring this into, you know, a gratitude attitude to recognize, yes, COVID is throwing us these challenges, but how much even more difficult would COVID be if 9 times 2 was 17 and 9 times 3 was 22? If those things weren't right in our lives. So whatever 9 times 2 is 18 represents, something that's right in your life. Whatever 9 times 4 is 36, whatever that represents in your life. And I remember I was asked to work with this company a number of years ago, and they were all being made redundant, and I was very respectful of that, very empathetic of that. But I asked them to imagine a scenario if they were going home this evening and they got a phone call, and the phone call was along the lines of, and in this case, the 9 times 1 is 7, represents they are going to lose their jobs, which they were about to do, and they were very much challenged by that, which I totally respect and understand. But I wanted them to suddenly see and maybe to understand that the power to help them get through this period of incredible uncertainty like COVID is the brain. This is where we got to go, is to the brain, because the brain, when you think about it, drives everything. And so what I wanted to show them how was they could reframe the situation and suddenly realize they had this power to get through this period, even though it might have felt so daunting, because obviously they were thinking about mortgages and children and putting food on the table and all other commitments and requirements that they might have and that they needed a job for. And I got them to imagine a scenario where they're driving home that evening, walking by reception on the way home that evening, and the receptionist stops them. And these are the people that are all about to be made redundant, and they're still at work a few months away from being let go. They're walking by reception on the way out that evening, and the receptionist stops them and said, listen, there's a phone call for you. It sounded urgent. You can take it in that room over there. So you go into the room, you pick up the phone, you hear a voice that you recognize, and this is what you hear. Get to the hospital quick, there's been an accident. Get here now. I said to these people, all of whom were about to be made redundant, is it fair to say if you got a phone call like that, you would suddenly become quite dismissive of the impact of losing a job, because now something even greater is in serious jeopardy, because presumably this represents maybe a family member, which is the 9 times 2 is 18, maybe having the family members in great health. So how much more challenging would COVID be if all these other things were suddenly taken away from us? And what it's designed to do for me certainly was to recognize, yes, at times in my life, things are going to happen that are not what I want them to be. 9 times 1 is 7. But at those times, to recognize and to practice outlining, well, how much more difficult would that be if I didn't have all these other things that are right in my life? And that's the power of framing, I believe, and that's the power of gratitude. And to, you know, how much more difficult would my business be if I didn't have a roof to maybe conduct online sessions or whatever, maybe to have the value that clients now still see in me, maybe to have a great partner that's supporting me in this period, food in the fridge. How much more difficult would it be if I didn't have those things? So if I can harness the recognition that I do these things, I believe it will help me be stronger through the COVID period.